interesting coming up and doing the sermon again. So I feel like I kind of cheated the last 2 times. Like the first time I just like did the testimony thing where I just told you about me and my life and what God was doing in it. That's kind of a freebie. And the next time was when I just had a baby. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on, and God was in the middle of it, and things were happening. And they were like, I just talked about the things that were like already happening. It was just the Vanna White of just turning the letters of what God was already doing. So this time I had to sit down and be like, okay, I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna put together a word. And so that was new. That was interesting. It was funny though because I journal sometimes, and so I was like, well, I'll do my journaling thing, and then I'll do my sermons. I sit down and I write out my stuff, and I get going, and I get about halfway done, and God goes, no, you're not doing that. And I was like, okay, well, I guess we're starting over then. So I start over, and I start a new one, and they go, no, I didn't tell you to do something different. You said we weren't doing that one that you put together, so go back to that scripture, and we're going to rework it again. So here's my revitalized version of it. Because I think a lot of times, me and Joe, Pastor Joe, if you know him, we connected because we'll talk about kind of like the heavy, weird, kind of like more intellectual side of certain things, and that stuff's fun for me to talk about, but it ends up being a crazy rabbit trail, and I get lost in like all the what ifs and what have yous that sometimes I miss, like the goodness that God has. And I feel like with someone who's like presenting a message, that should be kind of an important part of that. You know, I shouldn't just come up here and draw on about how weird things are and then walk out the door. That doesn't help anybody. Like, I want you guys to be able to get some, like, see how God's good. And so hopefully this is kind of a marriage of that stuff. Because I'm going to challenge some things. That's my hope here. Because I think that God has a way that he likes to do stuff. And I think that sometimes as people, we miss that sometimes for a variety of ways. So the other thing that struck me is, what do I say? If I put together a message, what do I say to people that have been Christians longer than I've been alive? That's kind of hard, right? Like I was like, you've been doing this for longer than me, but I'm gonna tell you, like, no, that's not how that works. And so I went to God to ask him, like, so God, what do you think about this stuff? What are your thoughts on that? And God was like, well, I think you're asking the wrong question. The question shouldn't be, what is Jared gonna tell those people? What's God gonna tell those people? So there you go. And it reminded me of something. I'm not like a guitar master by any means, but I teach a guitar class where I work. And people come in, and I kind of give them the tools so that they can learn how to play the guitar. And some are disappointed, because they think if they just show up 1 hour a week, that I'm going to make them a master guitar player. I'm like, oh no, that is not how this works. You come in, I give you encouragement, I give you tools, I show you how to do things, we troubleshoot together, and then you go practice it. And that's not practicing it. It's going to make you good as a guitar. And I feel like that's the same here. Like, my place is to not like transform you. I can't do that. I don't have those skills. God does. So the plan is for me to bring something that's a conversation piece that we can think about, we can talk about, and then you can take that to God, and then you guys can have your own dialogue about that. Because it's going to mean different things to different people. Like, when I talk about some of this stuff, some people are going to latch onto it and be like, yeah, that's my jam. Other people will be like, ooh, I don't know about that. And now that's a conversation you're going to have with God. You know, don't talk to me about it, I'll talk about it too. So it started with me reading through my Bible, and this verse in Hebrews stuck out to me. It's your first one here. Every high priest is a man chosen to represent other people in their dealings with God. He presents their gifts to God and offers sacrifices for their sins, and is able to deal gently with ignorant and wayward people because he himself is subject to the same weakness. Now, in this context, it's talking about the high priest, which is Jesus, of course, but as we know from reading about Jesus' life, he is a model for us. The things that we do should be emulating the things that he did. So if he's doing this, there's probably a pretty good chance that this is stuff that we're going to want to be doing too. The first part that jumped out about it was represents others in their dealings with God. That one was a little challenging for me. So I'm like, do I do that? Do I find somebody in my life and do I try to represent their interests in their dealings with God? I don't think I do. I think that a lot of times we go to God with our stuff and we deal with our stuff, and if someone wants to come and we'll include and we'll kind of share and do that together, but do you go and pursue someone on behalf of their relationship with God? It's kind of an interesting kind of gut check, like, oh, do I do this? It seems that our Christian culture is to live a Christ-like lifestyle and invite others. So that's kind of like what we see modeled in the culture. It's like the church is doing its thing, and then there's the world doing everything else. And if you want to come join us and take part in the festivities, you're more than welcome. But, we're here and you're there. But that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about reaching out to those other people, going and connecting those with other people, advocating for God for those people. It says to offer sacrifices for their sins. Sacrifices cost something. It wasn't just them just going oh God, they're pretty cool. No, the sacrifice is you had to do something. You didn't just talk about it. It was a tangible thing you could do. And we're called to do that for the people. Who specifically? It's easy to go out of your way to intercede for someone who's another believer. But what about if they are ignorant or wayward? Because it talks about that, going after the ignorant and the wayward people. Ignorance is kind of a dirty word in our culture, but when it breaks down, it really just means someone who's unaware of a thing. My example is, I'm ignorant when it comes to glitter, sparkle, makeup application for my daughter. She's got this bag, and it's a mermaid bag, and she opens it up, and she's got it filled with little kid makeup, and everything's glittery, and it's sticky, and I don't want to touch it ever. But she wants that done, I go, your mom's right over there. Right? I'm completely ignorant of it, and so it doesn't mean that's not a slam on my character. No one's a master of everything. No. Nicole's great, but talk to her about Fortnite. She's not going to know anything about that. She has a different skill set. Right. This game that teenagers are playing, not in there, not in that wheelhouse. That's okay. Where this connects, though, is people sometimes are ignorant about God. So some of them, even if they sound mad, or if they sound angry or bitter or awful, sometimes they literally just don't know. There's a guy who I work with who, he's one of the clients, and he's reading all these books about how man doesn't need God, and the atheist guide to morality, and I was like, that's kind of interesting, and so I saw that, and putting aside my general judgments on the issue, I was like, I'm going to read this. I'm going to see what this guy has to say. What's your argument? Because I feel like I understand a little bit of how the Bible works. So I'm like, what's your issue? And I read through, and it was really funny because they were like, well, as we all know, their opening statement was, as we all know, the Christian faith is based entirely off of the Ten Commandments. And I went, oh. The whole premise of the book was based around the assumption that Christianity was like an extended version of the Ten Commandments. And as we know, that's not true. They're completely missing it, and it's sad because they're missing not only the facts, they're missing all the good stuff that God has for them because they don't understand it. Which is why we intercede for these people and take part in their lives and try to show them what's actually going on. I mean, if someone's going to reject God, I'd rather have them reject God knowing everything than not, because that seems like a shame, right? Yeah. That they just don't get it. It's like trying to make a decision that you only know part of the situation. That's hard to do. The other one is the wayward. This is basically just another word for ornery. These people usually know better, but God bless them, they do it anyway. We all know people like that. They know better, and they go and they do it anyway, and you're just like, oh boy, you know that. Especially some of your parents out there, they're like, I raised you better. You know that they know better, and they do it anyway. But our response is the same one, to intercede on their behalf, even though they're being stupid. And that's a hard sell in our culture. And it's interesting because these things are both ways that we miss what God's trying to do to grow us. And I think that's what God's after. I hate to break it to you, but God kind of doesn't care about people's bad attitudes. People can write I hate God books all day, and God is not threatened. He's sovereign. He spoke existence with a word. Why would he care what people nasty grams about him? He doesn't. What he cares about is people having their ignorance interfere with relationship with him. Yeah. He cares about their bad decisions affecting their relationship to him. Right. He wants to gather everyone in. Right. He wants that to happen. And if those things are obstacles, he looks to you. He says, you're the people. You're my people. And these people over here, they're being weird. And we gotta help them, okay? Which is kind of a countercultural thing right now. And this is where I gotta make sure I don't rabbit trail too hard, because I have strong feelings on the subject. This doesn't sound like equality. Everyone says like, oh, we want equality. Oh, we do not. Equality says everyone gets the same chance. Equality says like, here's the starting line, there's the finish line, I'm gonna shoot the gun and everyone's gonna run. And if you trip and fall, you lose. Equality says everyone gets a ham sandwich and if you drop yours on the ground, you go hungry. That's equality. Everyone's fair. It's quote, fair. Like I said, I'm not gonna rabbit trail too hard, but anyone who promises fairness, ooh, that's not what we want. Listen, bear with me while I flesh this out a little bit. And then of course I gotta be a little heavy-handed here. Until you're ready to walk past a crying child in the gutter and donate money to Bill Gates, equality isn't real. I'm gonna treat everyone the same. As a child, they can take care of themselves. Like that's equality. I walk by her in the street and I don't give her any help. Why would I go and help this other person over here? Equal, it's balanced, right? No. Another funny example. If you let your spouse or brother, lifelong friend, whoever it is in your family that you trust, they come over and they say, can I borrow the keys to your car? It's a good chance you'd probably be like, yeah, sure, what are you gonna do? Go in the store? Yeah, that's fine. Now imagine if that was Kim Jong-un from North Korea. Like, no, you're gonna have a different response to that individual than you did to this individual over here. Like we don't treat everyone the same. We wanna say that we do, but nobody does. No, it's not even a real thing. So, that being said, I'm done with my tirade. So if that's not what we want to do, what do we want to do? Which I think is what God was really after. So all that other stuff is me just having fun. This is the part that I think God really wants to zoom in on. Is if we're not doing that, what are we going to do? What's the solution? I think too often we like point at things like, that's bad. But no one offers a solution, so we're not any better off. So here's the solution. Pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. That's God's definition. That was not me saying it, it's God saying that's how we do religion. We take care of people. We reach down and we lift up. We don't let the world corrupt us. We don't see something bad and then let that seep into us and be like that thing. Called to a higher standard. And the higher standard is righteousness. This is what everyone's after. Righteousness is the actual real deal. Equality cuts both ways. It says everyone gets the same chance, win or lose. Yes, it'll lift some people up, but it's going to cut some other people down because they want a level playing field. Righteousness doesn't. Righteousness says that people that have more reach down and pull down other people. And that's so much better because it's inclusive. It includes people into this thing. It's not just like the government writing checks and sliding them out to everybody so everyone has the same amount of money. No, this is somebody who has more and sees someone with less, and they're convicted by the Spirit to go do something about that, and they forge a connection. You know, like you hear about this guy that like paid off all the college debts of the graduating class. Yeah. You hear about that guy? That was awesome. There are people now that like look at that guy and they're like, dude, that's my guy. He helped me out. He connected with me. He did something for me. He changed my life. And he didn't do it because anyone told him to. It wasn't fair. The college down the road didn't get their bills paid for. He only did it for the one. But the fact that he did it for those people means the world. It was a good thing to do. It was a right thing to do. It's not fair that some have millions and others do not. It is morally right or righteous for the rich to provide for the needy. That's what happens in the Old Testament. Big fun fact, I was talking to someone the other day, they weren't aware, so maybe a lot of other people aren't. The Old Testament actually included some of the very first, for lack of a better term, welfare programs. What they would do is people would have a field, big old square, and they were instructed to harvest from the inside of the field, but leave the outsides. And they left the outside specifically so the widows, the orphans, and the foreigners can go somewhere to get fed without shame, without having to beg or to borrow or to steal. They had a place where they could go. And so we have this model where the rich, the business sector, the people that have are providing without question for people that have less. That's righteousness. This is a thing that happens in our culture that we need to take a little look at. When gay people say they want equal rights, they don't want equal rights. That's not what it's actually about. I mean, they say that, and I think maybe some of them believe that, but at its heart, they think they're hated. They think people's hearts are against them, and they want to be loved. That's the truth. That's what they want. They feel like an outsider. They feel like a castaway. And they want someone to look at them with something other than contempt. And that's something that I think the church should be able to do, right?
Yes.
I don't pay a whole lot of attention to these kind of things, but I saw this little blip one time of, there was a gay pride parade, and there was a guy with a shirt that said dad. And he just went and he gave people hugs. And these people were weeping from some stranger who just had the word dad written on their shirt, because their familial relationships were so broken, because they had such a breakdown that someone just saying, I'm going to pretend to be your dad and give you a hug, hit them in an emotional place, because they feel like an outcast. And this is something that the church should be able to do. They want the kind of righteousness that the Bible directs us to give, and then we should accommodate. Don't miss here. I'm not joining a cause. I'm not supporting a lifestyle. I'm only talking about the only thing that Jesus actually told us to do with these people, and that's to love them.
Amen.
It can be apart from politics. It can be apart from the news. It can be apart from all that stuff. Loving someone does not mean you have to agree with them or their lifestyle choices.
Amen. Right.
Right?
Yes.
And that's unilateral. I'm not just talking about this one specific issue. Like, that's unilateral. Like, if I only loved and valued people that shared the exact same values as me, like, who would I love? I would love myself, and that's it. Right?
That's true.
Does God love us because we think like Him and we're exactly like Him? No, we fall short every single day. Every single time we fall short, and He still loves us.
Amen.
And that's what we should treat the other people. We can look at them and be like, even if they're wayward, even if they're making bad decisions on purpose, and they're ruining their own lives, how does you standing in the back going, oh, they know about it. How does that help anyone? That doesn't help anybody. It doesn't do anything to feed their soul. It doesn't steer them from that path, because isn't that what we want? Pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for orphans and widows in their distress. And I think this is why the immigration thing really weirds me out, because I'm a lawful person. Like, I believe in the law. I think the law is a real and good thing that we should try to uphold. You know, maybe people shouldn't steal things and stab each other, and that's a good thing to have in a society. And we have laws and rules about people immigrating in, but the Bible doesn't say it two ways. It says care for widows and orphans, period, and then it stops. Like, that's kind of our job.
That's right.
And once again, I'm not choosing a political side. I'm not saying vote for this person or that person. You can vote for whoever you want. Whoever God's telling you to vote for is the one you vote for. What I'm saying is, when an immigrant shows up and they have nothing, and you're driving by or sipping on your coffee, like, we have to do something because the Bible said it. I'm not saying it. If you have an issue with that, you're like, I don't like it, talk to God. You guys have a conversation and you can work some stuff out, because I'm not even doing it. Lastly, out of James, refusing to let the world corrupt you. There's a variety of ways this can happen. In this context, I see it as clinging to human understanding of fairness and missing God's directive for righteousness. Oh boy, this one hits home for me. This is hard. I live in an area that's got a lot of homeless people in it. And a lot of them are on the wayward side. They're just choosing that lifestyle. And I fight it because my heart gets hard. After you see that so much, after they leave needles on the doorstep and my kid's like, Daddy's, what's that?
Yeah.
I have some feelings on that. But then I get challenged because I turn around and I read this and God says to love the wayward. And that's hard. It is a hard thing to do. But I need to refuse to let the world corrupt me. I need to refuse to let those negative experiences, those things that I see in the world, those things that hit me on that emotional level, I have to refuse to let those things be the reason why I stop being generous. I can't do that. That's not an option. But clinging to this idea of human fairness. Don't let your brain, your culture, even Christian culture, because this is the thing, to determine who's deserving of love. That's the world. Cling to God's directive to love everyone regardless of the climate, the political climate or culture. And once again, I say this not as someone who has mastered it. I say this as someone who sees it and I feel it and I think I'm probably not the only one. I bet there's someone else in here that you think like, I can think of a group of people that when I really break it down, I don't like them. They're wayward. They're choosing lawlessness. I gotta figure out a way to love them anyway, because that's what we're told to do. And then we're gonna take a little piece out of 1 Peter. Most important of all, continue to show deep love for another, for love covers a multitude of sins. Cheerfully share your home with those who are in need of a meal or a place to stay. That's a challenge. That's a challenge. Is anybody here ready to drive down the street and grab a homeless person and take them home and feed them? I don't think I am. I'll be honest, I don't think I am. But this is what I'm called to. And so this is a conversation I have with God. It's a thing I think about, and it's a thing I try to approach. I have to approach that place. That's kind of my destination. I'm trying to get somewhere. But the love covers a multitude of sins part. I like that one a lot. There's a thing that happens in our society. It's kind of a thing that there's a little terminology for it. It's called a call-out culture. I don't know if you've heard of it. So where you scrutinize some famous person's life, you find something problematic from probably many years ago, and then you expose it. Like you have someone who's like, oh, I'm a lawyer, and they're like, aha, in 2004 you said the N-words. That means you can't be a lawyer today.
I know.
And it's a thing that the people are piling on. We got people dredging up stuff from 20 years ago, 30 years ago. We got people like scrolling through Twitter feeds to try to find some nugget of thing that they said that doesn't fit the current political culture climate, which is madness to me because some of the stuff they're busting people for, back when they said it, it wasn't a big deal. So they say the thing, culture shifts, and then we look backwards and go, aha! In 2001 you weren't thinking like it's 2019, that means you need to be punished. Madness. So what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to cover people's sins. We're not supposed to expose them. We're not supposed to like point and draw attention to, because I think that's what people do to try to get away from their own stuff. You know, like if I'm having issues and I'm afraid someone's going to figure out that I stole $20, so I'm going to point at that guy who I know stole $30. We're going to get him. Everybody get him. Ah, he said he did the thing, and everyone look over there, so that way no one looks at me. And it's amazing what can happen though when you give somebody grace. Like I have excellent interpersonal relationships with a lot of people at work. A lot of them don't share a lifestyle that I'm a part of or agree with or really any of that stuff. But I treat them fairly. I treat them well. And when they make mistakes, I give them grace. It's so easy. I just go, it's okay. And move on with life. And people are drawn to that. They see me as a safe person. We have people like wandering up and telling me about their problems. Not because like I'm the super cool like counselor person. That's not a thing. It's because I don't judge them. I don't give them crap for their drama. I expect people to be a little broken and messed up, right? Let's be honest. We can kind of expect that. Like if you're gonna go to my house and expect it to be perfect because I'm a quote pastor, no. No, my children have ruined several things. I probably got some CD or album and you'd be like, oh, can you listen to that and still be a pastor? Like that's what it means to be a human, right? And everybody's that way. So when someone comes up to you and you start seeing their stuff, like give them some grace because everyone's got it. It's good to differentiate though. This is not hiding wrongdoing. This is not like I notice someone who's like beating up on their kids and I'm just gonna not say anything. That's not loving. This is not going out of your way to slander someone, which is what those people are doing. They're finding someone, they're calling people around and gathering them so that they can go focus in on someone else's problem. That's bad business right there. God rid. I mean, it should be like when you talk to a counselor though, like if you're gonna like do something illegal or kill yourself, yes, someone else should be told, but everything else should be confidential. So like, when you're talking, when we're interfacing with people, like, we need to have that on our radar. Like, are they a threat to themselves or others? If not, it's okay. You know, be there for them, support them, give them some hope. We are forgiven much and given much grace. We should do the same. This is like a top is coming down from the top. You know, God sees us. He sees us with all of our weirdness. He loves us anyway. So for us to turn around and see someone else who's got a little weirdness in their life and judge them and be like, they're terrible, or draw attention to it and point, they're the people that don't go to church on Sunday and they call themselves Christians. Like, if we're doing that, are we forgetting? And I'm going to read this one. I almost didn't put it in, but I put it in anyway because I figured y'all are so mature we're going to handle this like adults. Because Jesus talks about this specifically, and it's a little intense. So let's read this thing out of Matthew 18. This is Jesus speaking. He's talking to somebody. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who decided to bring up his accounts to date with servants who had borrowed money from him. In the process, one of his debtors was brought in who owed him millions of dollars. He could not pay, so his master ordered that he be sold along with his wife and his children and everything and all he owned to pay the debt. Super intense. You're in debt to like almost worse than the mob apparently because they're selling your kids into slavery. But the man fell down before his master and begged him, please be patient with me and I will pay for it all. Then his master was filled with pity for him and he released him and forgave his debt. It's a good day, right? You're millions of dollars in the hole of some guy who's gonna like do bad stuff and then he just goes, you know what? All is forgiven. Go in peace. That's a good day. But when the man left the king, he went to a fellow servant who owed him a few $1,000s. He grabbed him by the throat and demanded instant payment. His fellow servant fell down before him and begged him for a little more. Please, be patient with me and I will pay it, he pleaded. The same thing that this guy just did. But his creditor wouldn't wait. He had the man arrested and put into prison until the debt could be paid in full. When some of the other servants saw this, they were very upset. They went to the king and told him everything that had happened. The king called the man he'd forgiven and said, you evil servant, I forgave you the tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant just as I had mercy on you? And then the angry king sent the man to prison to be tortured till he paid his debt. Wow. That's something. So, to clarify, to smooth it over and make it less heavy, this is not the law. This is not God saying, if you judge somebody in your judgy pants, I am going to torture you. God's not saying that. That's not happening right now. What God's doing is, God, like us, is expressing his feelings. When he sees that happen, he feels at a loss, like frustrated. You evil servant, I have given you so much, and then you do this with your freedom? It's this bizarre thing we see when someone's freed from some kind of oppression. You see this sometimes in people who've suffered abuse, like children who've been abused. They grow up and then all of a sudden they're abusing their kids, and you're like, wow, how did we get there? I don't know why. I don't have the psychoanalytical way to figure that out, but I know it's a human tendency. We try to recreate our trauma to overcome it, right? Someone's terrible to us, we're going to be terrible to somebody else. God's trying to break that cycle. He's trying to separate that. He's trying to say, like, be the bigger person. You know, maybe your dad smacked you around, but you don't need to smack your kids around. Maybe someone in your family was cruel to you. But you're going to be the one to break that cycle. You're going to be the one to say, no, not me.
Amen. Yes.
And God wants not only you to do that, he wants to empower you to do that. And part of that empowering is a community of people, right? We can't do it by ourselves, man. I mean, my dad had it rough. He didn't have a dad. He had to figure it out. He had some people in his life that were pouring into him. You know, my mom's dad, his stepfather was a big influence in his life. Supported him, encouraged him, prayed for him. And those are the things that made him be able to be a good dad to me. He broke that cycle, and it's hard. He said he had his moments of doubt where he's like, I don't even know if I'm doing this right. He tried. And that means the world. This isn't intended, that verse, not saying not trying to scare anybody. We serve a loving God, but we need to be mindful of how we treat others. Even the ignorant, even those that don't know, even the wayward, those that do know, and they do it anyway.
Yes.
Because why does it say? Because we're subject to the same weakness. You know you've had that moment where you're like, you do something, you do the thing, and right afterwards you're like, I know better. And then things go horribly wrong, and there's that part of you that's like, yeah. Yep, knew that was coming. Like, but I still, I did it anyway. And it's so frustrating. And God wants us to remember that and extend that grace out to other people. Because we're, like I said, we're the same way. The thing that gets me don't expose, cover. So that's a hard one. I feel like God's grace is so big, so massive, that we don't really understand it, that we don't get it. And that's, I mean, we're the ignorant. We don't get how big and how deep that grace is, which makes this stuff hard, you know? And so my prayer would be that we get it, that we get how deep, how wide the love and the grace is. Because when you're filled with that, when you get that, when that sinks in and the gravity that the creator of the universe is on your side, he is for you, he is with you, he's pouring into you, and he dances with joy at your presence. Like, when that settles in your core, the part of who you are, that it is who you are, when that settles there, all of a sudden these mistakes that people make are so trivial. Because you have that wellspring of good stuff, and you want to share it. So that's my prayer for myself, for you guys. Do we get that? Do we get how deep, how wide that grace is? You know, I mean, I talked about a lot of stuff. I talked about like one of the intellectual thoughts and pursuits, and that's cool, and it's good to wrap our heads around it. But the truth of the matter is, that's all garbage if we don't feel it, if it's not real, if it doesn't settle into that place inside of you that's the core of who you are. If that never happens, it's cool ideas. Something's kind of neat. So what do we do with that? For my application, I have for our minds, because it's in the equation. Like I just said, it's not the whole equation, but it's in the equation. It's part of it. Think about a group of people or an individual that you don't like. They rub you the wrong way. It's something about it doesn't get you. Know that God's telling you to love them even though they're a mess. It's a hard thing. That's the thing worth doing. Tangible. Reach out to others in their struggle with grace and compassion. Think about someone you know who is ignorant or wayward. Pray about how to talk to them in a way that they can hear. And this is a big one. There's a lot of people that think we're going to talk to somebody, I'm going to tell you X, Y, and Z, and you're just going to get it. It's got to be a way that they can hear. And sometimes people aren't ready for big stuff. Like you got to chip away at that iceberg sometimes. You got to just like hit the same spot over and over again. And it looks like nothing's happening, but all of a sudden one day just a big chunk falls off, and you're like, oh, something happened, hooray. Because that's what it's like dealing with people sometimes. That was where I got that analogy from. Is I used to work with foster kids who had issues, and they couldn't be in foster homes for whatever reason. And some of them, like, you can't just, they're traumatized 7-year-olds. Like, you're not just going to tell them what to do and have them do it. That's not happening. But what you can do is give them stability, give them love, and keep poking that spot, that one behavior thing, like that issue that they have, the reason why they're not in a family right now. You keep poking it, and then eventually, sometimes years down the line, it like falls off. They're free, and they can go on with their lives. But the time in between the beginning and the end of that process can be a while. And so I encourage you and the people that you deal with, like if you hear this and you're like, yes, I know this person, they're ignorant and or wayward, and I really want to reach them with God's love, and you got the momentum, and you go and you talk to them, and they're just like, man, whatever, and they walk away. Don't be discouraged.
That's right.
You're gonna peek, 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 chip away. And one day they're gonna go, hey, wait a minute. You know, it's our consistency that is gonna bring people to Christ. It's our like steadiness, our steadfastness, our love, our compassion, our consistency. When they see us go through hard times, when they see like something terrible happen and we go, oh my gosh, okay, we got this, I got this. And then you go on with your life and they look how you don't fall apart, you don't fall to addiction and like trauma and all that other nasty stuff. And they see that there's something real happening there. Tangent there. Do something tangible to show people they're loved. That's another challenge. When I talked about the high priest offering sacrifices for sins, it was a thing. Sacrifice was a thing. They brought in the animal, he did his like cut stuff, he did all those things. So if we're advocating on people's parts, sometimes that looks like something. Go to their dirty house and hang out with them, you know? Meet them somewhere that's not your favorite place to eat. Connect with them in some way. Be like a thing. You know, it's one thing to think about it, it's another thing to understand it, and then the next step is you gotta do it. You gotta find those people. You step out. You know, you see that person walk by and nobody likes them and they're a grump. Find something nice to say to the grump. Sometimes it pays off. Once again, my workplace is a weird place because there's so many personalities. There's some people there that are the nastiest people in the world, but I would never know it. Because I took the time to be kind to them from the get-go. And when they threw nastiness at me, I'd be like, okay. And I treated them like a person, and I honored them, and I loved them, and I was considerate. And then they turn around, and they're nasty to everyone else, but they're not nasty to me. So I was kind to them. So it's kind of a little bit of a minor superpower that I will encourage people to do. Like, even when they're wayward, even when you know that they know better, like, I work in mental health. You'd think that the people that work in mental health would understand mental health. And they come up to me and they're trying to be manipulative and weird, and I'm like, oh honey, I do this all day, every day. You're not, there's no fast news going on here. But I don't call them out. I don't try to drag them down. I don't try to point fingers and get other people like, look, this person's being a jerk. Just love them through it. Thing with people too is they don't need you to show them they're a mess. They already know it. I mean, granted, there's special cases, but I feel like for the most part, people know that things, that's why they're so volatile. That's why they're so reactive. That's why, like, you get too close to one of their issues and they lash out because they know it's a mess. They don't need yet another finger pointing. They have that dialogue in the head running on a loop 24/7. That's just on a loop. So if you notice something like, oh my gosh, that person is like such a pain to be around, that's running in the background of their head all day, every day. It just cycles through. They know it. So you pointing the finger and saying, it's this. That's not how it is. That's not how we reach people. That's not how we love God. That's not how we like bring people in. That's not how we gather them in. That's not how we rehabilitate people. So I think that's the thing that call out culture misses, is there's no redemption. It's like this person's here and they said the bad thing and we get them, we pounce on them, bam, they're fired. Then what? What do they do? Like, not eat or get another job or what? There's no rehabilitation. There's no making it better. Like, wouldn't we want the people in our lives that are the nastiest, meanest, most awful people ever? Wouldn't we like them to wake up one day and go, oh my gosh, I was so wrong. I'm so sorry. I've been so nasty to you. Will you please forgive me? Wouldn't that be good? Like, there's a whole score of people that are hating on Trump and like he's a terrible person, and I'm not going to agree on one side or the other of that conversation because it's lit up right now. But here's the one thing I'll say. There's a funny thing I heard. Like, he's the pilot on the plane we're all on. We don't want him to crash. Right? Wouldn't it be great if he just woke up one day and decided to stop writing nasty things on Twitter? That would be great. Wouldn't it be great if we woke up one day and decided that he wanted to pursue justice and righteousness and goodness? Isn't that what we want? We don't get that by throwing stones. And I don't say that to you specifically because I know most of y'all are good at that. Say that about like that worldview that the world gets, that the way, that lens that they look at things through. I'll encourage you guys to like challenge that, both in your own life or other people, if you can do it in a loving way. You're like, does that help anything? So, and I think that's the next level. If I'm saying this stuff, and you're a veteran in the faith, and you're like, check, done, got it, easy mode. It's probably true for some of you. If you know that you already got this, if you're already loving your neighbor 110%, you're hitting it, you're hitting the ground running, you're doing amazing, that is wonderful. Now you gotta take that, and we gotta connect it to someone else, and we need to bring them up to that level too. Because that's righteousness. Equality says, you got a Bible, read it too. I do. I got my education, read my Bible, you got a Bible, you read that, we're equal, we're balanced. No. Righteousness says reach down and grab them, pull them up. So if you're solid, find somebody in your life, reach down, pull them up. We live in a crazy world because even if you think like, well, maybe I don't have that much to offer, I don't got it, I'm having a hard time, I'm struggling, everything sucks. There's somebody that's got it worse off. There's somebody out there who's got it worse off. There's always someone you can lift up. The good part is like you got the Spirit of the living God dwelling inside of you. Like Nancy talking about the Holy Spirit, like the Holy Spirit, it hovered over the waters of creation, and it's hanging out with you while you eat nachos. Like it's kind of an amazing thing that I feel like sometimes we don't connect with as much as we can. So advocate, find someone else. Lift them up, encourage them, empower them. So we got to get it. We got to get the depth of God's love for us. And I think that's kind of my landing place for all this. Because I think everything else hinges on that. If our thinking is right, if our actions are right, we don't really get the depth of God's love for us. Then all that stuff comes out of a work. Like I'm going to try to go do it. Have you ever tried to be nice to someone when you don't want to?
Yes.
How'd that work? Not good. And I try that too. Like my wife's fine. My wife sometimes will be going through stuff and then she needs help with something. And if my attitude's bad, I say like, how can I help?
Yeah.
I don't get to help if I say it that way. It's got to be in my heart. My heart's got to be in the right place. I got to be in the right, like, oh, how can I help? And it sounds like such a subtle little difference, but in that moment you can see someone's heart. So until we can get that, until you can press into God. So there's your homework. You press into God. See how deep that love goes. And when you feel that, and when you get that, you're going to see these other people that don't have it, and you're going to want to give to them, You're not going to want to give them the Bible. You're not going to throw a track at them. You're not going to do a drive-by like, turn or burn. Like, no, we're not doing that. It's not happening. You're going to that person, and you're like, how can I serve you? How can I love you? And if enough people do that, and they all are those Christian kind of folk, pretty soon they're going to want to join the team. The only person that I've ever led to Christ, I did on accident. I don't know if I've told the story before, but there was a friend of mine, and he knew I was a Christian, and I'm just doing my thing, doing my best, and honestly, at that point in my life, my best didn't look very good. But he was watching, and then years down the line, he was like, so I see on TV that the Bible, the Christians say this, what's that about? And sometimes I'm like, it's a little sideways, it's more like this, or other times it was like, oh no, that's not a thing. Those people are weirdos. And I try to ask him about it, and he'd shut conversation down. He's like, no, that was it. I had my one question, now I'm out. Peace out. And this cycle kind of went over every 6 months, maybe a year. He'd ask me one question. And then eventually, all of a sudden, one day, he's like, yes, I think I'm a Christian. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Who helped you out with that? Who's it? Like, it was actually kind of just watching you. And I was like, oh, oh my. I'm glad that worked. I don't know if I would advertise that. Come check me out. I want to know what Christian's like. I mean, maybe more so now than then, but at the time I was like, yikes. but it worked. And it worked because it was because there's a part of me that always kind of gets that God's real, He's present, He's here, and He cares for me. And so my natural expression of life, the things I naturally do to connect with people, when someone rolls up all nasty and I kind of like, oh wow, how's your day? When that stuff happens, I'm not trying to do it, it's coming out of that inner wellspring, that place where God's hangs out. I always touch here because it's like the soul, that's like the old fashioned little soul fits in there. Little picture. I don't know if it's real or not, but it makes sense to me. So God, I thank you that I got a chance to talk to everybody, and I ask retroactively if there's anything I said that was weird or off base, that you smooth that out for me, because I know you got the Holy Spirit and that's kind of your thing. I know that I fall short in this area. I know that I have a hard time with certain people, and when I connect to you and I get you and I feel your love, and I know that I'm not doing that as good as I can, not out of shame, but out of the genuine desire, I want to be better, Lord. And so I just ask you to help me, to give me the pieces that I need, the things that in my life to make me able to do this thing. And I want to, as someone who's in the middle of that, I want to extend that same prayer out to the people that are listening today, Lord. That when your soul speaks to them, when you decode all of my words, and they sit with this idea, I pray that that idea is something that grows, Lord, that they're able to find that way to connect to you, to hook into that Holy Spirit that they carry inside of them, Lord. And then that blossoms, it turns into something that looks like caring for others. It looks like not judging them. It looks like finding that wayward and that ignorant person and not helping them out of a sense of fairness, not helping them out of a sense of what we think is right, but helping them and loving them out of righteousness that comes only from you. So I pray that for myself, I pray that for the people here, and I pray that it spreads, Lord, that the people that are here, that are going through that stuff, that are figuring out these things, I pray they're able to advocate for other people, and not in the buzzword way of advocate, but in the real way that word's supposed to be used, to see someone and to want to do something to make their life better, out of a sense not of justice but of righteousness, Lord. Amen. Thanks for going on a trip with me, guys. Doing a closing song? You guys want a closing song? Let's do a closing song. While I do that, I'm going to hang out over here. If you want to get prayed for, you can do that.